The greatest evil is done by those who think they are doing good. C.S. Lewis. The villain in my novel knows a terrible truth, one that would certainly trigger the practical end of the world as soon as it let out. So rather than risk societal breakdown, he takes matters into his own hands, ultimately becoming a figure who could rival this terrible truth in terms of how cruel he could truly be. My name is C.J. Cowart. I'm an aspiring author drafting up a sci-fi fantasy novel that readers will hopefully be obsessed with for years to come. My novel takes place in a world where people either rely on elemental abilities, called conjurers, or the advancement of technology, these people are called artisans, to thrive in society, and my villain, Psycho, falls into the latter. For whatever reason, he went off the map for years and formed a terrorist organization named Mashin in the shadows. This group has the goal of kidnapping as many conjurers as possible, already having taken tens of millions all over the world by the start of the story. And as the story goes on, you get hints of why he's doing what he's doing. When I first started conceptualizing Psycho's backstory, I knew I wanted him to be a more tragic character, so he needed to be involved in the core story in some way. At first, his character grew more power-hungry for his own reasons, but that just wasn't nearly enough, and he came off as too stereotypical. So maybe he believes that his actions are saving the world? Okay, but from what? And that was what ultimately gave birth to the character of Abaddon, who is my Satan-esque bad guy, who was defeated in a war long ago and was banished from the world. As I got a more solid plan down for Abaddon, I started crafting what type of prophecy I was going to leave for his eventual return. It had to be something that was truly terrifying, something that would make people crap their pants if they found it in real life. And for spoiler purposes, I won't get too specific right now, but essentially the prophecy speaks of a quote-unquote heir that would act as a possessed vessel for the demon to return to the physical world with. So I made it that Psycho worked for the monarchy of the artisan nation of Tokunia as a respected fusion engineer and history buff. He gets tasked with being the first person to explore Abaddon's old stomping grounds in centuries. But once Psycho uncovers this prophecy, he of course goes into a panic and brings his findings to the king at the time, who is adamant that Psycho is delusional. The king was simply thinking, well, Abaddon was severely wounded and had no way to heal, so surely he couldn't have found a way to return, right? Besides, even if he did, our tech and elemental abilities have advanced so much over the centuries that they'd surely stand an even better chance than their ancestors did. So because of that, Psycho decides to take matters into his own hands and starts searching for the heir. And in the end, he tries to kill an infant. Of course, he gets arrested and sentenced to death. And not long into his time on death row, his loyalists from his expedition team break him out, and they all go into hiding, eventually forming the terrorist group Mashin. Now, I'm sure many people have already made this connection, but Psycho might be starting to sound like another certain villain, Thanos. He notices a serious problem on his homeworld, he offered a rather morbid but effective solution, and he was called a madman for it. And when his prediction came to pass, well, you know how Titan ended up. So how do you write a character coming to the conclusion of needing to kill a baby? Well, as you can see, I'm channeling my inner war machine wanting to kill baby Thanos here. So let's take the moment Psycho finds the baby. At this point, it has been months since the king turned him away, and he's been on a nearly non-stop search for this heir to Abaddon's throne. As far as he knows, the Malos, who are the last of the lineage of Abaddon's followers, was completely wiped out. So how could he find this heir? I needed a way for him to find the heir without it being coincidental, so I gave him a tool for it. DNA signatures from the relics he found back at Abaddon's stronghold. If he isolated that signature using his tech, he could travel the world running scans on everything he crossed paths with. Next, I write it so that eventually, after months of searching over nearly every nation in the world, he finally found the lone surviving member of the Malos, an orphan baby in a quiet village in Psycho's home nation in Tokunia. But I needed a way for Psycho to not be able to kill the baby, otherwise he wins right then and there. So I made it that an unseen force was keeping Psycho mere centimeters away from fulfilling his mission. Try as he might, with all of the force he could muster, his weapons would just stop in midair, and to this day he still doesn't know exactly why. Of course, he was spotted and was promptly arrested on child endangerment and attempted murder charges. This is the perfect start of a downward spiral. This is the moment where Psycho's character had to begin losing his mind, otherwise he wouldn't go to the other lengths that he will throughout the novel. After he's sentenced to death row, this is the moment where his mentality just goes down the drain. The thoughts keep repeating in his head. He did everything in his power to convince the king of what was coming, but he was turned away for once. And then he finds this heir after months of searching, only to be held mere centimeters away from finishing the job. And now he's locked up for trying to save the world. What did he do wrong? What was protecting the baby from death? What else could he have said to convince the king? Why was he seen as a murderous psychopath? He was trapped in the cycle for weeks and weeks, resulting in sleepless nights before his followers held a major breakout operation. They used his old tech from his governmental contract days to lay a major assault on the prison and get their leader out to safety. This whole sequence just helps bring some continuity into Psycho's character and what would soon become the start of Mashin. Then it's just 20 years in hiding, spending all of that time trying to find ways to potentially kill the heir. So how can I solidify Psycho's mentality? Well, the answer is already there. Mashin had the DNA to test, so not all hope was lost yet. I wrote that Psycho began numerous tests to finally fulfill his goal. He duplicated the DNA for multiple tests, came up with various solutions on attempting to killing it off, yet nothing came of it. But eventually he found a potential solution. After years of failed tests, Psycho goes as far as to kidnap his first conjurer and use his tech to suck out the very energy that gives them their elemental abilities, Gyra. And with that, Psycho's mentality is solidified. He finally had one method showing some promise of killing the corruption and is willing to do anything to see its completion through. But how much Gyra would it take to kill off all of that corruption? Now, since Psycho is a man of science, he starts asking questions and testing new hypotheses. What unit of measurement to use to figure out how much corruption was in a DNA sample of a certain size? How much Gyra did it take to kill off the corruption in that sample? And how would all of that scale to a fully grown person? And this would lead to a very unfortunate truth. He would have to sap the energy from a number of conjurers so staggering that he might end up destroying what he's trying to save. Put simply, Psycho believes that this is the only way to prevent the return of Abaddon. In his mind, he'd rather take the fall as a monster that permanently alters millions rather than let billions get conquered by a demon. Put yourself in his shoes and ask yourself what other options you would have. For a quick comparison, take Dr. Mann in Interstellar, for example. He falsified data on hospitable planets because someone needed to survive long enough to bring back a solution of some kind, which led to him sacrificing the crew of the Endurance. He alone made the decision to prioritize the future of the human race rather than the few members of the spacecraft. It was needed for a larger salvation. That's exactly what was going through Psycho's mind. One person's calculation, applied to others without consent, justified by the scale of what was being saved. The main difference is that Man's purpose was ultimately self-serving. He just wanted to survive. But Psycho doesn't want to build an empire. He's just a guy who's too certain for his own good. And he ran the math, and he made his move. Now, what I'm not going to do is make him akin to Drago Bloodfist, the villain of How to Train Your Dragon 2. His whole thing was, I got hurt by a dragon, so I want to enslave all of them so I can rule the world. And sure, he wants to start by protecting people and eventually shifts to conquest, but the story never properly shows that shift. For all but one small moment, Drago is shown as nothing more than a power-hungry, one-dimensional threat. I wanted Psycho's ideology to have so much logic and reason behind it that the reader questions if he's as crazy as he's made out to be, because Psycho's reasonings and backstory are sound, but the means by which to get there are definitely up for contention. So with all of that in mind, what is this archetype that I have been describing so far? Well, the closest pre-existing trope that I could find is called the Cassandra Truth or Ignored Expert trope. This person wants to warn of a real threat and gets dismissed because the threat isn't taken seriously. However, to the best of my knowledge, the trope stops at this point, and assuming I'm understanding it correctly, it doesn't cover what happens after the dismissal. That said, I would like to propose a new trope, what I'm calling the Cassandra Extremist. This is a person that warns or gets warned of a real threat, was dismissed for it, and decided to take large-scale action to stop it on their own. Thanos warns of his planet's extinction, gets laughed at, and sees his world fall, and tries to, quote-unquote, save the rest of the universe from a similar fate. Psycho found evidence of an ancient evil's return, was dismissed by his king when warning of it, and took action over the decades to try and stop it from happening. They committed or tried to commit mass-scale horrors to prevent their respective threats, and they did it all on their own terms. No oversight, no accountability, no one to check their math. And what makes them all unsettling is that you can follow their train of thought every step of the way. Now, as the aspiring author of this novel, I gotta say it has been so fun writing out Psycho's arc. He's unsettling and calculating in the most charismatic way, and it's been a joy seeing all of it slowly come to life. Now, this is only one of 2 villain types that I've been hoping to cover. I just covered how I'm going to do my main human villain, but what about the bigger, badder, all-powerful one that I've been hinting at this whole film? Maybe you get to stick around to see that one next? Maybe? If you're interested, the like and subscribe buttons are just down below. And also let me know what you think of Psycho as a character in the comments. I'd love to get some early feedback. And with that, I will catch you all later. God bless.